Alrighty. Well, thanks for hanging out. I know this was a kind of a pain in the butt to get together, just because of well craziness right now. But thanks a lot for taking the time. Always fun talking with you.
Yeah, pleasure as always. Always gentlemanly and refined and
Why?
elegant.
Oh. I do want to say just before we start, probably on behalf of a lot of people right now, I want to congratulate you guys on a great launch. It's been a lot of fun. Just totally, different than what we've had in the past 4 years, and I think a lot of people have really enjoyed it. With the lack of pressure and just kind of doing what they want to do and enjoying the game. So thanks a lot for a great launch.
Thank you. It's been quite the journey. It's been quite the year, but it's been a fun few weeks, a crazy few weeks, but with a lot of fun all around.
For sure. All right. Well, you know me. Let's just get right into it. People want info, and you want to
Yep.
give info, I'm sure. So, in general, though, on the topic of, the launch being almost 3 weeks old now, how do you guys feel about it? Anything that didn't meet your expectations so far, or that exceeded your expectations? Anything out of the blue?
Um, Honestly, I think like you just said, overall we feel pretty good. I think it's been a successful launch. It's been a smooth launch. We know, there were early, in the first few days there were some stability issues and queues on some high pop servers in a few different regions. Some of that is just we get more people on a single server than we ever have had before as everyone comes back to play the expansion, and we find some limits that we didn't know existed. And our heroic server engineers work through those limits, and I think we're in a pretty good place there. Um, Honestly, the most refreshing thing for us as a team has been we're dealing with a bunch of small problems. We're looking at balance, we're looking at clarity of the Great Vault and the adventure system and how the rewards feel there and how comprehensible things are. And like it's a lot of small problems because there isn't like this one huge fire that needs all of our attention. Um, I think back to Legion launch, and right around this time, legendaries were the issue, right? And the soft cap or hard cap on getting legendaries and the wide variance in their tuning, as well as, we were trying to solve the Maw of Souls problem as everyone was spending all day just spamming Maw runs. And BFA, I don't need to talk about, Azerite Plus. Here, by and large, the package feels good. It works. And it's awesome seeing people having fun across a wide range of playstyles and content. And we can focus on those individual concerns and try to do everything we can to make things better.
All right. I forgot to turn off my alerts. Since we're, I'm just gonna give me 1 second to turn these off.
Sure.
Done. Okay. Since let's dive into hot topic stuff. I'm sure you're no stranger to covenants and how much of a back and forth there was with the community, and you guys standing your ground on, forced covenant choice and please don't put player power, and we think it's good to put player power, etc. In a beta environment, it's a bit different, right? You have a lot of feedback from selected individuals and etc. But now that it's out finally in a live environment, do you guys feel that it's been successful in your eyes? I mean, obviously we've seen some metrics all over the place of definitely some very skewed data in terms of people favoring different covenants. Do you think that's just because people are following fantasy or just following guides on what's the best? How do you guys feel about it so far?
I think overall, we're happy with it. Overall, I would call it a success. Does that mean it's perfect? No, certainly not. And I think we've looked at a lot of the same stats, and I think those are pretty close to accurate. They're being pulled from Armory and real player data. I don't think our goal here was ever that we imagined that if you look at any class or any spec, it's going to be this perfect 25, 25, 25, 25 split across the board. And like, that's the dream. I mean, even if there weren't player power, there are some skews. I think you'd expect more Kyrian to go Paladin than the average class. You'd expect more Druid to go Night Fae than the average class if things were purely cosmetic. And of course, when you layer on power, mechanics, it's I think we've never said that it's wrong or that we don't want people to choose based on what they think is going to make them most effective. For some people, that's the lens through which every choice is viewed. I know that's the case for you. It's the case for a lot of the people listening to this right now, I'm sure. And that's fine. I think that the thing we're trying to avoid is situations where it felt bad. It felt like we were creating traps. It felt like there wasn't a satisfying right answer. Um, But I think the payoff for the effort of trying to balance covenants, of trying to ensure that there is power and there are mechanical choices as well as cosmetic ones, has been the range of feedback from across the community, both anecdotal and just jumping in and reading forum threads, discussions on Reddit and elsewhere about choosing a covenant, and hearing people talk about how it was actually surprising that they thought they came into the expansion thinking for sure they were going to go, say, Necrolord. Then they played Ardenweald and fell in love with the zone and had a hard choice to make at max level. And I think the choice having weight is part of what creates those moments. And, we've also seen players switch covenants if what they picked wasn't really to their liking for whatever reason. And I think people have started to realize that's actually not that big an undertaking. You can do it if you want to do it. You're not stuck in the covenant that you chose. And by and large, I think if we could go back, we would do it all the same way.
Okay, so no regrets on your guys' part there.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, let's be honest. Throughout the entire expansion, there's probably just going to be people that disagree with that, and people that agree with it. Right? It's just it's. I think it's just a range of players who want to be able to min max, which leads me more into something that I maybe held a bit more personally and was hoping would change. But what are your guys' feelings on the conduit spec situation now that that's also live? That kind of restriction on all specs sharing the same, conduit charges, etc. Has there been any more consideration given to maybe spec lockouts or loadouts rather, for the conduits to allow people to more easily, min max is the wrong word, but try to get some more ideal loadouts for the various activities that they do?
So min max, in other words.
Listen, I'm trying to put it elegantly, as you stated.
Sorry. No current plans, but it's something we're keeping an eye on for sure. I think as the third soulbind unlocks and people have more of the tree and more of the paths accessible, that for certain classes certainly lends itself to a natural solution to that problem. If you have your tank soulbind and your healer soulbind and your DPS soulbind on a rep paladin that you can feel pretty good about, that probably gets us to where we want to be. And I think we've always expressed some concern about, it's min maxing, but it's fiddling and switching back and forth between conduits, how often players are doing that, and how, whether it's an interesting choice or whether it's just the one mechanical right answer. And there's that duality of, on the one hand, if you're someone who plays a ton of roles, you might articulate it as, well, I'm being punished for doing that. The flip side is that people who focus on a single role or a single playstyle can have a small reward for doing so. Not a huge reward for doing so. We're not trying to force people to play one spec. We're not trying to say that, that hybrid playstyle isn't something that is encouraged and mainstream and fully effective. But the small edge of maybe, okay, you have this 1-2% edge because you don't have to compromise on this one conduit choice, or you can use your optimal soulbinds for both specs at once. We don't think that's the end of the world if that's where things land.
But are we really at like that fine? Like, is that worth restricting people who like to? It's not even about, oh, I want to go ret from prot right now, and oh no, I can't use the ideal. It's about like, oh, I want to go PvP and I can't PvP now, and there's usually a pretty vast difference in terms of raid and dungeon as well. So I don't know if that is that 1%, 2% there for somebody specializing in that spec. Are we in that range in your guys' opinion, instead of restricting the people that want to do various activities?
I think that's exactly what we're going to be looking at and hearing specific examples about. I agree. Certainly, if someone feels like there is only one soulbind that's at all viable for PvP, and that same soulbind is the only one that's viable for, raid DPS, and for whatever reason the other two are way behind or just lacking crucial utility and functionality, well, then we should fix stuff about those soulbinds. Because yes, we could solve the problem by saying you can have spec-specific loadouts, but we also have 2 dead soulbinds in that case, which isn't great either. So if there are specific problems like those, that's exactly the kind of thing we're going to want to jump in and address in some of our first patches. Whereas, yeah, if we're hearing and seeing as the system unfolds, feedback that consistently, persistently across multiple covenants, multiple classes, this seems like a huge problem, that then a more universal systemic solution will be more appropriate, but we're just not there yet.
Right. Okay. I guess in that world of doing various things, me, I'm a PVE goer, but I did get a lot of questions and curiosity. In even myself, I've done a fair bit of PvP in the past few days, just because it's early season and there's some reward for PVE.
Yep.
What are your guys' feelings right now on some of the state and speed of PvP, for lack of a better term? I just watched a video of three sub rogues globaling Windwalker in point 0.1 seconds. Are we what's going on there right now?
Uh, Definite sub buffs coming down the pipe.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah, yeah. I didn't want to
Make
ask,
them
but
today, but yeah. No, yes, there are. I think I'm not sure if those hit the hotfix notes yet, but they will be in short order. There are some PvP specific tuning changes being made to sub, as well as a couple of other specs. Now, I think after a PvP meta that for so long was, honestly, it could just feel like it took forever to kill people, and that was just where things were. We're enjoying, and we've heard the feedback about the general snappier pace, and so we're hesitant to swing the pendulum too far back in the other direction. But obviously, if you're getting globaled, if a rogue opens on you, and before you feel like you have a chance to react or have any counterplay, you're dead. That's too fast. That's not a good place for things to land. So we're looking at specific outliers, the combinations of trinkets, legendaries, honor talents, etc., that are causing that to happen and are going to rein those in. But overall, higher lethality, slightly faster paced PvP, I think, is better for WoW all around.
okay. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't dabble much, but I've enjoyed it more as well. But, minus the getting global part, not as fun. In the world of things that were discussed during beta, and I still see in forums and people talk about, more near and dear to my heart, tank threat. We're just getting it hotfixed another 10% now. Why are you guys so hesitant to just crank it and just buff it 100, 200%, maybe buff tank damage a bit, whatever it may be? Like, do you still want to kind of maintain that level of some type of threat from back in the day being an important mechanic, or do you not consider that it's outdated? Where do you guys stand on that?
I think there's a middle ground there. I think it's important that threat should matter, should exist as a mechanic. It shouldn't be something that tanks are actively struggling with or having to worry about in minute-to-minute gameplay when they're trying to actually keep mobs stuck to them. Like, if you're putting in any appreciable amount of effort as a tank to fight the mobs in a trash pack or whatever, DPS shouldn't be really worried about that. What we've seen, though, is when we go too far with tank threat, this was the case for large chunks of Legion, a bit less so in BFA, but to some extent, threat gets so extreme that you can have a few mobs in death and decay for a couple seconds, or they can get diseases on them, or they can be in a consecrate for a few seconds, and you get a couple of abilities on them, and then the tank can just kite them from like 90% to 0 without doing anything to them from that point on. And that's too far on the other end, right? If a DPS should not be ripping aggro off a mob that a tank is actively hitting, trying to hold on to. If you're just ignoring something, then yes, threat exists as a mechanic to control that. And so we've been looking at, on the damage side, if there are specific specs that are lagging behind there, then we're looking to address that on that spec level, like we did for Blood Death Knight recently. If it just feels like there's a little bit of that across the board, we'll make a universal threat change like we just did. But we want to creep up tank threat until we get to a point where it feels pretty solid and reliable, but don't want to go so far that it just becomes utterly irrelevant.
And then in that same vein, it kind of changes all the time, and people have different ideas about what they want to do. Where do you really see tank damage lying as a percentage of DPS, especially in single target and AoE? Because and it's varied every expansion. What's your guys' philosophy right now on where that should lie exactly?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that we have a specific number in mind, or I mean, the combat team may, but I don't necessarily know what that number is off the top of my head. Philosophically, damage it's an interesting choice when survival doesn't matter, when you're not worried about dying moment to moment. I mean, obviously, you can always pull more, but if not, then being able to trade off survivability for more damage in your gearing or in your, just the abilities you're using is an interesting decision, as opposed to not having that option at all. I think, at times in the past where tanks, particularly in dungeons, have, at times been number one on damage or at the top over damage, over pure DPS. That's felt wrong. I think at the same time, particularly given the range of content, just outdoor world content, Torghast, all the rest, tanks should feel like they can do enough damage to hold their own, to actually be able to kill things in a respectable amount of time. But I would say we're probably trying to pull a little bit away from some of the pure damage meta that we saw for large chunks of BFA, where it felt like survival was almost, except for very, very high keys and versatility stacking and all the rest, where a tank's primary job and almost the way that your skill was measured past a certain point was how much damage you could pump out, rather than what you're doing to control mobs, what you're doing to stay alive.
Okay. Is there anything that is too high or too low still in your guys' opinion at the moment, or?
What do you think?
You know, I don't want to say anything because then people are gonna get mad. I think DK, I think DK and Druid honestly might want a bit of love. Well, the Vengeance is tricky, right? Because Vengeance Kyrian just does so much damage, but you guys, I assume, probably don't want to touch Covenants because people are so committed to them at the moment. But I don't know. You tell me. I guess we'll see.
Yep, indeed.
If you remember in past interviews we've done, we did like kind of a little quick fire round. I'll just shoot out some questions, and if you want to, you could just yes no them, or if you want to elaborate on anything, feel free.
Sure.
So we got a few of those right now. Can legendaries be socketed?
Yes.
Yes.
If they couldn't, then making a legendary in a socket slot would be a mistake.
Okay. Is that incredibly loud sound when entering the mod going to get fixed?
It's fixed as of 3 hours ago.
Oh.
It was. Yep. So yes.
Okay. Now this one you're probably gonna make me want to chat a bit on, but everybody has asked this. Master Looter, especially always a hot topic when progression's coming in. Any more thoughts towards it? Versions of it, or are we just personal loot all the way again? This expansion.
Personal loot all the way. This expansion. I understand. I mean, we hear the feedback, understand where the concerns come from, and I think we have yet to come up with a design that solves all of the problems, and so we remain in the status quo. But certainly understand that for organized guilds in particular, they'd love more control over where the loot's going or where it's being funneled, so to speak.
Is there any reason why? Like, I understood the reasons why personal loot was implemented, especially from a more like general player base or casual perspective, but do you not think that there could be a system where there's some form of master loot for organized guilds, whether it be for the first month or, like a 90% rule, or of the run being, guildmate or whatever? Like, why are you guys hesitant on trying to work a bit towards those organized teams?
We had it. I mean, that's how it worked for a while with the hybrid model of master and personal, and pugs had to use personal, but guild groups could opt into master. And there are a couple of challenges. Some of them are actually just with how we build loot tables and how we can construct things. When we know if everyone's using personal loot, we can build loot tables in somewhat different ways. They don't have to worry about, like, will an item drop for a rare spec or class that may not be in the raid, like ranged weapons or shields or whatever, because we know the personal logic handles that. But another big piece of it is that even in organized guilds, and I understand as someone who, plays myself in a group that I would call my friends, that, I've raided with for a long time, and we don't have loot drama, master loot wouldn't be a problem for us if it were enabled. People would be kind, and we would share loot around and pass it to whoever needed it most, and stuff would work itself out. For a large number of guilds, even organized guilds, and especially organized competitive guilds at times, the amount of control that gets exerted over loot, with what rights trials have to loot and all the rest, actually ended up being a pretty negative experience for a large number of players. And the getting people to not use master loot as a matter of choice wasn't really going to happen when the people making those decisions are themselves the master looters who have full control and full benefits of the system. And moving to a world where, if you don't get the item, you put in the effort, you downed a boss, you didn't get the item, blame Blizzard. Don't blame your fellow players. Don't blame a system that is engineered to deny you loot. And yes, I know in practice, applicants who don't like the way a guild is run, who don't like their loot policies, can just go find a different group to trial with or raid with instead. In practice, that was a lot easier said than done, and it ended up being an intensely negative experience for a lot of people trying to get even into the organized raid scene. And so just as Master Loot was abused in pugs, there was a fair amount of abuse in organized guilds too.
Okay. All right. Not something I've experienced, but I also don't encapsulate literally everyone who's experienced top end. Let's move on though for the quickfire stuff. Can we make the dupe conduits that drop from various sources either sellable or just not drop if you already have that rank or lower?
If you have a conduit installed in your forge, you should never see a dupe.
Okay.
Now, if you're carrying it in your bags, then yes, it's possible. Part of why they're not sellable is just because it would be a trap. So yes, if you end up with a dupe, you do have to delete it currently, but we don't have a way of only making that edge case dupe sellable without making them all sellable, and that's almost never going to be the right call. So,
okay, so just a safety precaution.
Yep.
Is the world boss a set rotation?
Yes, it is. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what the order is, but you don't have to worry about complete randomness. We're not going to, see the same boss 3 times before we've seen the one that drops your favorite legendary pattern.
Okay. Any plans to add more checkpoints in some of the dungeons, which can be obviously quite punishing, like spires, as an example?
No plans currently. I would recommend not wiping.
Okay. Any considerations toward faction balance or incentivizing faction balance at the moment?
I mean, yeah, so obviously in specific systems like war mode, we have systems to incentivize more equal participation. Faction balance is something that we talk about a lot as a team and don't have any answer to currently. Because I don't know that there were, I'm curious to hear community thoughts around the topic. I think the damage here was done years ago. And that's one of those areas where I intensely wish, we could rewind the clock and do some things differently. Nerf troll racials back in, Throne of Thunder is the kind of thing that would have done it. It was a gradual transition of top guilds that moved from Alliance to Horde in many cases because of racials 6 to 8 years ago. And then things like Rocket Jump on Kill Jaden were just that extra little push. And today, the imbalance is not driven by racials. It's not driven by an actual power difference. It's just driven by social structures. And so fixing the problem would require not, just evening things out. It's really the question of how do we get players who went from Alliance to Horde to go back to Alliance? And there aren't really any clean answers to that. I mean, I think the kind of dirty answer is like, okay, let's buff Alliance racials massively to the point that they're just overwhelmingly dominant. I don't think anyone would feel particularly good about that. I don't think that really would feel like
Dwarf was so close for Nathria.
Yeah, so that was, I mean, those dwarves are still amazing for Nathria. There's a ton of bleeds. It was just that specific one on generals.
Right.
That we didn't just make it, we didn't just say you can't stone form it. We also said you can't bop it, etc. Because it's just a central encounter mechanic, right? That's the kind of thing that we generally said you can't immune off because it would just delete an entire mechanic from the fight. So, sorry, dwarves.
Fair. Another one that's been asked a lot in the community. Any attention to fixing old raid tuning right now, which apparently is even harder at level 60 than level 50?
So I'm curious to hear specific examples there, particularly as people get a bit more gear under their belts at level 60. There was a bug in the first week of Shadowlands that we fixed where the scaling benefit that you were getting, like the damage done and taken multiplier against Legion content in particular, was going down as you leveled. That was not intended. It exists. It exists again and should be working the way it's supposed to, where if you go hit a mob in a Legion raid, you're literally going to do 8 times as much damage and take 1/8 as much damage as you would just fighting something in Shadowlands or BFA. To the extent that people, particularly if they're comparing themselves when they had a ton of corruption at the end of BFA to where they are now, and finding that kill times are a bit longer or some things are more challenging, that's unfortunately, and I know this isn't a super satisfying answer, that's just a bit of how leveling in WoW has worked for like 15 years with ratings. Losing when you go from having 30% plus crit, haste, etc., to leveling up, your item level's only going up by a couple dozen, by a few dozen initially. You're not getting enough strength into Agi to make up for all of those secondaries that you lost. But as you get into, eye level 200 gear, as you get more of your soulbind unlocked, you get your legendary crafted, I think player power should just objectively exceed what people were at the end of BFA against the old content. And so I know there's some folks who, were looking to just go in and smash Legion raids. You'll get there, but that's just part of the power progression of gearing up.
Oh, sorry, there we go. My mic wasn't unmuting. All right. That one was asked us by the community. Felt very strongly about that one. But let's dive more into we had some obviously beta hot topics, more current hot topics. I'm sure some of these you want to get off your chest too. Gearing right now, loot and gearing.
Yeah.
Definitely a hot spot, especially with Mythic Plus. People are grinding a lot, finding that, we just did a 40-minute dungeon, I didn't get anything. One piece of gear, etc. I personally really appreciate the drawback on gear and having it be more precious again, especially with randomization gone. But on the flip side, when gear is the only thing available in something like M+, and there's no further, more concrete incentivization gear, transmog, vanity rewards, whatever it may be, achievements, higher achievements for higher dungeons, sky's the limit here. Are there any plans to address that? Is this where we want to stay? Do you guys think gear's in a good spot right now at where it sits? Or can we expect maybe some kind of carrot dangling in the future?
So gear overall, I think we're happy with how that's played out for the last few weeks. I think going to be really interesting to see how the Great Vault feels when it's for real tomorrow. And just how those decisions feel and what the upgrades feel like and what the feedback we get out of that is. Like, we know what the sort of modeling looks like for what that's going to do to your item level over time, but there's no real substitute for that just raw emotional feedback of, did this feel good? Or are people still coming away from their weekly chest feeling like it's kind of a bummer? Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to interject for a sec, but it's not just my point was, it's not just about player power acquisition, right? It's more in the direction of just, there just doesn't seem to be enough, let's say, substance in M+ to incentivize you to want to run higher. Challenge modes had portals and awesome transmogs and etc. And there's a bit of it now. There's an achievement and an amount kind of thing. But, why are you guys so hesitant? I mean, it's been over 4 years now. Why are you so hesitant to really invest in something like Mythic Plus to have people, search for these awesome, cool vanity rewards that aren't related to player power?
We should do more there, and we want to do more there. I think I think there's been a progression towards Mythic Plus really being enshrined as a permanent endgame addition, as like a third pillar of the endgame alongside raids and PvP. And just as someone who participates in the PvP season has a participation mount and a high-end gladiator prestige mount they can work towards, and is getting, titles and other accomplishments along the way, Mythic Plus should offer that, either that exact thing or something like it or more. And I agree that it's a shortcoming of the system that we're not there yet. I think I agreeing with your first point. I don't think the answer is to go back to just more loot or more guaranteed loot, because we know where that leads. That, it feels good for the first couple of weeks, then you get to a point where you're not getting upgrades out of that system anyway, unless we have randomness, and then you're back going down the road of fishing for RNG upgrades, and sadness lies down that path.
Okay. On the note of loot, tier sets, are they still on the menu? And are we expecting the same kind of tier sets that we once knew, just like a gear slot, 5 pieces, choose 4? Or are you guys moving towards a new system? Because one of the issues before was we don't like locking you to a slot. So is anything to share there, or is it just kind of be the same old thing?
We're not 100% sure yet, honestly. I think that's our so tier sets are definitely still on the menu. They will be coming in a later Shadowlands patch. Where I've seen the art; they're pretty awesome. I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody, like just the range of community reactions to the return of class sets, because our artists just knock it out of the park time after time. The old system, I think, is kind of our default starting point. We want to come up with something better. We want to, reintroducing them as a chance to re-examine some of their shortcomings, which are, like you mentioned, the way they could feel like they quickly monopolized the specific slots that they were in. But at the end of the day, it's about the return of tier sets. To us means two things. First, it means a class-based aesthetic. It means a sick rogue transmog or DK transmog or priest transmog. That's your tier set for that patch. And the second is that feeling of collection and completion. And, I am cobbling together a set that once I have it will modify my gameplay in some way that also feels like part of your experience for that tier. And I think there's a few different ways that we could recapture that aren't just the literal 2-piece, 4-piece out of 5 slots approach, but we haven't settled on something specific yet.
Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to it. I think everybody is.
Yep.
Having 12 defined sets again. You don't have to go into detail on this because there's definitely more pressing topics to get to in the time we have. But any plans to bolster like calling rewards, or are you guys okay with where they are right now? Or maybe like World Quest related things. People seem to have kind of out-leveled a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you guys good with kind of leaving them a bit more at a chilled out pace, so to speak, just so we don't have that, oh, I have to go do this mentality?
I think it's exactly what you just mentioned. I think we're okay with where they are right now. For a lot of players, they're still a really good source of just random conduits, some filling in the gaps on gear. Long term, they probably need something else, but we don't want to jump into something too soon that's going to make people feel like we certainly don't want people to go back to feeling like they have to clear their map of world quests every day, and feeling like you can graduate out of some of that content is healthy. But whether it's tied to the reputations that you're getting from them or the boxes themselves, there should be something there that feels relevant in the long run.
Okay. Let's jump into the two new systems here in Shadowlands, Torghast and the Maw. Definitely a lot of talk about this kind of stuff here right now. A bit of the smaller nitty-gritty for Torghast. Any plans on making floor unlocks account-wide? So if you play multiple tunes, you don't have to keep progressing layer 1, 2, 3, etc.?
No plans right now. I think some of the thought there is just, there's a difficulty progression, and your fresh 60 alt isn't particularly well geared, and so you can't necessarily handle the same things that your main could. And while yes, I know that some people would, okay, if you're not geared enough to do a 7, don't do a 7. It's not always that clear cut. In the long run, I think we're definitely going to want something there, particularly as there's more sources of catch-up gear, and it's possible that a fresh 60 can gear up much more rapidly. We know that doing Torghast layers just for the sake of unlocking something when you know that it's trivial and you far exceed the tuning target for it isn't particularly compelling. So nothing right now. Probably some sort of catch-up or skip mechanism long term.
Okay. Any plans to allow leveling in Torghast ever?
Yeah, that's a suggestion we've heard a lot from Threads of Fate. Nothing specific to announce right now, but I think that's a cool idea for us to think through how we work in. Like right now, that the Maw and that system just aren't unlocked at all while you're leveling. There's a few questions we'd have to answer, but I think it came up even during Shadowlands development and beta. But we wanted to have a better understanding of how Torghast was going to play out in practice before committing to something like that. But we're all for more variety in terms of leveling, and the idea of of being able to get a little bit of a head start on Soul Ash if you want to do that with your time while you're leveling seems pretty rad.
Cool. Twisting Corridor stuff. You probably don't want to spoil, but how much longer are we expecting to wait for Twisting Corridors to unlock?
Soon. So I think people who experience some of this on beta or have data mine the quest line or whatever will know what this means. But the series of quests that you currently have from Bolvar and Oribos will eventually lead you into Twisting Corridors, and that's what unlocks Twisting Corridors, and that unlock is account wide.
Okay, good. Now, something that I've been dying to finally ask you or Paul or whoever it is, what happened to unlimited layer Torghast in Twisting Corridors, at least throughout the last portions of beta. It just kind of magically disappeared. Nothing was said about it. That was meant to be one of the big selling points, keep scaling and go higher, and it's tougher, and lots of achievements and vanity rewards and blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of just became the same scaling as Layer 8. Layer 8 was the cap. It wasn't particularly difficult once you were decently geared, let's say, heroic-ish, level. And now it just seems that there's just a mount tied to it. And that was the last iteration we saw of it in beta. Is there any plans for Unlimited to come back? Is there any plans to infuse some love into it in terms of making it challenging, etc.?
Yes. So the version of Twisting Corridors that people are going to see when it opens is definitely harder than the last version that was seen on beta. I mean, the fact that, I mean, the layer scaling itself is also different. Layer 1 of a regular wing, Skoldus or whatever, has to be tuned so that someone who's a fresh 60 in eye level 140 could go in and do their intro quest. By the time you're making it to Twisting Corridors, you should be in epics. And if you're not, then you're not ready for Twisting Corridors. So it can start at a much higher threshold. And really, it's like 18 floors is a long run. We don't have true infinite mode, though it's something that we might revisit later on in the expansion. And I think a lot of the decisions made around Twisting Corridors at the end are a reflection of us wanting to learn more about how Torghast played out in the live game, with people doing it for real, with real stakes and rewards on the line, and to give us more of a chance to let that inform the way the feature would grow and develop, rather than making a whole bunch of layered assumptions about tuning and motivations and what would stay engaging for, theoretically infinite runs without really having seen the fundamentals yet.
Okay. So it's capped at Layer 8 instead of Layer Infinity.
Yes. Okay. And then the runs are 18 floors, which is still quite a long run.
Right. Okay. For Twisting Corridors, then, are there plans to, or not plans to, but are we getting a lot of rewards and incentive to do it? Kind of the discussion we had with M+ as well, or is it just the Maw mount ultimately?
I mean, there are other cosmetic rewards. I forget all of them off the top of my head, but it's not just for clearing Layer 8. As you're climbing the tower, you'll be getting some other stuff along the way. And that's something that is a prime candidate for future expansion as we move on. I think as it's currently positioned, it is set up more as like a Mage Tower kind of vibe, where it's a bit of a one and done. It's, here's this really challenging goal to work towards, and once you accomplish it, you have this reward that's useful and that you can show off. And if you want to go back and do it for fun, you can, but there isn't currently a reason to do that. But as Torghast continues to unfold, as something we really see as a foundation to build upon for the rest of the expansion, that's the sort of thing we're definitely going to want to explore more.
So you mentioned Mage Tower, and it made my ears burn a bit. Can we ever expect to see some super badass transmog related things in there? Possibly, hopefully, please.
Anything is possible, but yeah, it's a mix of having the right reward, having the right content. The Mage Tower has a very fond place in all of our hearts, and we're just looking for the opportunity to do something like that again.
Okay. Speaking of the Maw, I'm just going, there's not like a series of questions here, rather than just my player experience in the Maw, maybe a bit more hardcore than most, doing the min-maxing and the logging in and out, which I'm sure you guys didn't like, but nonetheless has been fixed. But it seems that we've kind of already seen the Maw. We've seen the end of the Maw. People have reached apprehensive or whatever her exalted status is with Venari. Some people have already gotten, a mount from the rare. We've seen all the rares. We've discovered pretty much all of the map. We've seen the events. But this was kind of meant to be, if I'm not mistaken, a big end game systems or area. Where are we going exactly with the Maw? What is the further point of the Maw outside of just farming for sockets or bumping up your conduit upgrades? Is there going to be further development there, or is this kind of it?
Well, I think certainly the people who have really been hitting the Maw hard are very far ahead of where the average player is right now. I think for the vast majority of people playing Shadowlands, they still have a ton to look forward to. Most people aren't even doing, certainly not doing the Beast Warrens. Many are just getting into Perdition Hold right now on a regular basis. As for the Maw and the role of the Maw and Shadowlands going forward, yes, there's definitely more planned. And some of that is, you might guess, given the nature of the Maw and who is there and whose domain it is, that our story is going to take us there in the long run. And we, have some dudes to kill, some loot to get, some things to accomplish in the Maw, and that's going to entail a lot more content development and even potentially expansion of the space.
And perhaps a raid location.
You never know.
You never know. Speaking of raiding, Mythic raiding starts tomorrow, and Castle Nathria has been. It does apparently.
I hadn't heard.
Nathria has been amazing so far. It's been fantastic. And the tuning, I mean, you know me, I've talked for many years, and we always talk about how the raids went, and I'm a bit of a hard ass, so to speak, with tuning, and I always want tuning to be tough and have a nice natural progression. And Nathria has been really good, to the point that some people have actually felt that it was maybe it was uncharacteristically harder than we've expected in the past, let's say 4 years or so, the past 2 expansions. Is this intended? Are you guys trying to make raiding a bit more difficult, or was there just kind of a series of over tunings on some of the bosses that you did nerf, and by extension going into Mythic, what are we expecting there? Because you probably have an easier time tuning now with the variants of gear gone, I would assume, right? So what are we looking at for Mythic? Is it meant to be kind of quite the ride, a bit tougher, or still that kind of 7 to 10 day mark goal for World First?
I think I know better than to try to guess the number of days that it's going to take.
Right.
But because people surprise me on both ends of the spectrum, every tier. But no, I think by and large, we're really happy with where the tuning has landed. I think there were certainly some hotfixes that we rolled out earlier in the week. Some things that were just straight up bugs, like the scaling of Huntsman's Bleed with regard to raid size. Sludge Fist on normal was a bit more intense than any normal mode raid boss has any business being, but Heroic's been fine. And in general, seeing people progress through Heroic, particularly the later bosses there, I think are all in a great place for Heroic. A big part of it is, I would say, some of it's just the availability of gear and what item level people have going in compared to what the raid is tuned for. I think historically we've always kind of tuned raids for certain baseline item levels and end game systems power progression states. Like, we tune Heroic for the Heroic audience that is not necessarily Mythic raiders, but organized groups or pretty serious players who are going in who have roughly normal mode raid gear. And no one doing Heroic at the start of this week had eye level 200 gear. Basically, hardly anyone has that at this point. Some people are getting there at the end of their weeks gearing up. Whereas in past expansions, past tiers, with systems like Warforging and Titan Forging, more widespread loot, people were just more rapidly getting to the point where they weren't undergeared for the content the way they are now. And I expect that to continue into Mythic. The other wrinkle is, those end game systems and the power that you get from them, we can make much more consistent baseline assumptions about what players have going in. Like, everyone is Renown 9. We know that. Doesn't matter, there's no really out there folks spending 100 hours a week in islands getting Heart of Azeroth levels that are far beyond what we'd expected or reasonably were able to tune for, because it wouldn't have been correct for us to do that. It would have been unfair to people who weren't doing that. Whereas this time around, there isn't that ability to get the same range of advantages. And so things are just kind of playing out as a more natural progression. And I think that's going to hold up through Mythic. And I'm excited to see what the next week brings.
Is there anything the player base doesn't know about that you're particularly excited to see? Like some Mythic only modes or some surprises that we wouldn't have expected based on testing, etc.?
I mean, even answering that question would be giving something away. So it's going to be a fun week. It's going to be a fun couple weeks.
Okay, I tried. One more whammy before, because I think we're running short on time here.
Yeah.
One more thing that I wanted to mention earlier, I just kind of saved it for the end. Mission table stuff. This has been something that, it seems fun, but for a lot of people is a bit confusing, maybe a bit underwhelming. The user interface for it is a bit lacking. It doesn't really inform you exactly what your percentages are. Sometimes it says, harms the closest enemy, but both enemies are equidistant to one of the slots, etc. Are there any plans to A, improve the UI for the mission table or further develop it? And then B, also try to balance some of the Covenant followers and companions, etc., that seem to be particularly weak for, let's say, Kyrian versus Night Fae?
Yep. Yes, on all counts. Some of it is, I think, a lot of the adventures testing and tuning that was done over the course of beta was using a wider range of unlocks across the different covenants. And I think a miss on our part, frankly, was not really paying enough attention to the specific like week 2, week 3 experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the order in which you get different things matters a lot. Well, how many healers do you have access to in this covenant versus that covenant early on, for example? I think in the long run, things balance out more. But understandably, people don't care about the long run. They care about how does it feel today. And yes, certainly, as we talk about, clarity within the UI and the way the mission progression feels, those are all things that we're actively discussing. In some cases, the sort of thing we can address via hotfix. In other cases, something that will be addressed in our first patch when we get a chance to do that. Something else I can talk about that we've been discussing is the feeling of some of the more challenging missions that scale with your own levels, like the Soul Ash ones in particular, that can kind of always feel just a bit out of reach. That doesn't feel great. It feels crappy. We're looking at actually changing those to a set of more static missions.
Oh, thank God.
That you can actually all right, there's a fixed level 20 Soul Ash mission. You can get to the point where you can beat this 100% of the time, but then there's a harder level 30 version that gives more Soul Ash. You can work your way up towards that one and at least, feel like you're building towards a goal, overcoming it, and then moving on. And we've heard a lot of feedback, particularly around that. That always feels like the thing that's dangling just out of reach in a frustrating way.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're kind of at time now, if I'm not mistaken. So just like I've done with kind of some of those class community shows that I did a couple months ago, I want to leave you, Ian, if the floor is yours, if you want to address the player base about anything or teaser us about something coming in the future or any note you want to give us, have at it.
So I honestly, I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank you. I want to thank you all, and you, Ted, for feedback throughout beta, the criticism throughout beta where it was warranted, for placing some faith in us. And at times, despite us disappointing you in the past, for giving this team, giving this game a chance, and for making the WoW community everything that it is. I think it's a really exciting time for World of Warcraft. It's humbling to be a part of, and thank you so much. You, the community collectively, you are this game, and my team. We are its custodians, and we want to do everything we can to make your time in Azeroth and the Shadowlands as great as it possibly can be. We can't make everybody happy all the time, but we're always listening. We always want to try, and want to keep this rolling on into 2021. Hopefully, a much better year on all fronts in every possible way. And thank you for just taking this journey with us.
I mean, we all wanted the game to be as best as possible. I'm going to be very annoying for a second. I forgot to ask one important thing because everyone's raging about it. Legendary tuning, and any notes about that? Are we expecting any last second tuning before Mythic? Whatever.
So I mean, I think you probably just saw the balanced legendary hotfix that was announced. And that's a conservative change. I think it was taking it from 50% to 40%. It should still be the best all-around legendary. I think our goal is we want to be pretty hands-off on legendaries in particular, particularly right now. I think a legendary tuning pass is going to be something that makes a ton of sense for our first small patch, where we can give a ton of advance notice. You can see it on the PTR. You can know this change is coming a month from now. You can plan around a different legendary if you want. But we know that changing legendaries right now has the huge risk of just, completely upsetting someone's investment in the one legendary they had a chance to build. And so it's kind of a last resort. But if there's a spec that is really overperforming, and that overperformance is almost completely tied to a specific legendary, it wouldn't be the right move for us to nerf the entire spec punishing everyone who doesn't have that legendary just because of that combination. But when we make the change, we're going to do it as conservatively as possible. Like if the numerical right answer mathematically might be like, all right, we're going to take this thing down by 40%, we might only take it down by 20%, leaving it probably stronger than it should be long term, just to make sure that no one who made that legendary regrets their choice. But extreme outliers, we have to do something about.
Okay, that's fair. Now let's pretend that was part of the main show and we just had that very heartfelt message after. So,
okay.
But Ian, thanks a lot for tuning in. I know these hours were crazy. 2:30 a.m. interview for EU, but I appreciate the time and congratulations yet again on a honestly a great launch. It's been a great launch so far, and it's hopefully only great from here. And here's to a good Mythic week.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and yeah, good luck in Nathria.
Thank you. I think I'll need it. All right. Bye bye.